Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today we have a real treat for you as we are talking to the one and only Miss Jurnee Smollett, the star of the Apple TV Plus series Smoke. We're going to kick things off by introducing you to the AAFCA members on the call today, starting with Carolyn Hines in Toronto, Karan Lenoir Kelly in Charlottesville, Virginia, Stacey Yvonne in Los Angeles, Jill Monroe in Los Angeles, Chris Johnson in Charlotte, North Carolina, Brandon Collins in New York, New York, and Nick Hamilton in LA. I think that's everyone. I am going to let you guys do what you do so well, and I'll see you on the other side.
Why send you? You don't know anything about arson.
Yeah, but I know a ton about crime scene analysis.
Why is she here again?
You're one man dealing with a fire plague. Accept the help. You need to get somebody quick before one of them kills again.
Serial arsonists tend to be powerless in their own lives. They want other people to know what that feels like. Don't let them in your head.
That's not the kind of guy that gets in my head.
How you feeling lately?
You seem a little off. Here is to the hero.
If I suspected your husband of a crime, would that shock you? What crime would that be? Or what crime do you think you'd be capable of?
Hello, Jurnee. So nice to meet you here virtually. This is Chris with CaraVision Network out of Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina, actually, itself. And thanks so much for your time. Enjoyed the Apple TV Plus series Smoke you in all of your roles that you've played through the years of various films and various TV series. My question for you is, what drew you to the role in Smoke? And what made this character stand out from others that you've played?
Yeah, I'm such a fan of Dennis Lehane's writing, Mystic River, Shutter Island. He has such a way with the pen, and drawing you in and writing this genre, the suspense thrillers, as good as anyone, right? But what I love so much also about what he's done with Smoke is it's essentially a character driven story within the genre. And this character, Michelle, that I play, I mean, I was in love with her from the very first time he introduced her, like you meet her, she's got a sledgehammer and she's literally destroying her home. And that just made me lean in of like, wait, why is she destroying her home? And as I read on, I was just so fascinated by her inner demons, her inner life, her struggles, someone who's obviously been othered, working in a white male dominated space. How has she survived? How has she thrived? Um, and she's just really a walking contradiction, and I love when writers aren't afraid to write flawed characters because we all have our flaws. And it's just more interesting to play opposing forces within someone. And so, yeah, I was a fan of Blackbird and what Dennis Lehane and Edgerton did together. So there was a number of reasons that made me go, hell yes.
Jurnee, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your question, Chris.
Hi, Brandon Collins from the Media and Popcorn Podcast. Now, I read that you gained 15 pounds to portray the military vet, your character. And my question for you is, when you gain weight for a role, what's the process for when you're done with the shoot? Do you just keep up with that regime, or do you go back to your typical lifestyle and diet?
You know, I when I rapped, yeah, the workouts were really intense, and it was this meal plan that my trainer and I came up with, where I was honestly eating like 5 meals a day, like three big meals and two smaller ones. And I'm not gonna lie and pretend I kept it up. No. You know, um, I've, if I'm just being candid, I have kept on a lot of the weight, but it ain't as muscular, because I like being in the gym. I like working out, but those workouts were a little real intense. So, it's interesting what the body can do, right? And what I love so much about this process was I felt stronger than ever. And that's really what I fell in love with, was this idea of like, whoa, I can lift heavier than I ever can, or I can, just there were markers we hit of like, okay, I can lift my body weight. Then we got to our point where she pushed me so hard I could lift double my body weight. And it was just, yeah, I've never felt stronger. So, no, I'm not as muscular as as I got with Michelle, but I like the new body. So that's what I'll say.
All right, great job. Thank you.
Hi, Journey. Carolyn for Carolyn Talks YouTube podcast channel. And thank you so much for joining us again. This is the second time we've spoken to you, I think, within a year span, and you're playing a completely different character than what you did in your previous film. And in this series, I gotta say, Michelle is a case. She's something else. She's a trip. But I noticed there's something interesting about the way she interacts with people, especially men, because she's surrounded mostly by men almost the entire show, including even her brother. There's these moments where she's either super close to them, where there's almost this sense of sexual chemistry or even sexual antagonism between her and these men. Like they stand like super close, or they're sexually intimate, or she's always standing back and observing them. Like there's scenes where she's like leaning on the desk with her arms folded and she's watching them. But there's a scene that I want to talk to where I feel both of these aspects of her come through. And it's the scene where she's observing Dave, played by Taron Egerton, and Freddie, played by Natalia Gumo and Mwene. And this scene is so intense. And it's a scene where she's observing, but this time she's behind a glass. She's further back than before. And I'm wondering, like, for you as an actress, what is it like watching two actors like Natalia and Taron have such a visceral interaction, but then being a character like Michelle, who's an observer, watching these two men have this interaction that she understands in a way that we don't even get to understand until closer to the end of the show. So I wanted to ask you about her penchant for observing, and like what that was like for you as an actress playing someone who's an observer.
It's a great question. There's a lot of the playing with the different energies, the feminine, masculine energy that obviously we all are born with. But, in Michelle, the way she turns it up and turns it down in moments. Again, yeah, it's like you said, she is surrounded by so many men. And, I think particularly in that scene, one, it's such a privilege to watch these two actors just go at it, and so for me, it just makes my job so much easier. If I'm being, all I have to do is listen and watch. She is almost like she's I don't want to say a hawk, but she is very keen on what is not being said. And that's really what she's listening for, is anything that she can pick up and use and weaponize against Dave. Because Intari's character sees Dave for what he is, and he recognizes himself in him, and yet that's not something she can prove in court, right? And so she's waiting and hoping that Intari will be able to break him, you know, uh, And so it's a joy to be a part of this cast because everyone just is bringing their A game. Everyone's just killing it. And so you're all you have to do is listen, you know.
Yeah, that scene was a lot. And it was interesting because I've actually previously interviewed Natara for his own film project, Memories of Love Return, because he's a filmmaker as well. So it's interesting watching people who are filmmakers and actors like interact. And that scene was just like took my breath away. I had to like sit back and it was just like, huh,
Yes.
okay. But I think you guys all did a fantastic job with this season. And Michelle, she's a good God girl. Wow. And that's all
I
I gotta say.
know, girl, listen, who you telling, okay? She's a, but I feel incredibly privileged. And your comment earlier you made about having interviewed me for something completely different means so much because I feel privileged to be able to step into various skins, people who have different inner turmoil, people who have different walks in life, different professions, um, I feel so privileged that over the past few years, it's like being an attorney, excuse me, being an attorney in the burial or being a woman chasing down her child's kidnapper in lieu or being a special agent in the order and now with Michelle, like I feel blessed that I'm not pigeonholed to like, one type of woman and being able to show the multi, layers of who we are as women.
No, thank you so much. And it's been a privilege watching you grow from East Bayou to this. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you for rolling with me this long. Okay.
Hi, my name is Karan Benoit Kelly with Karanism.com and Love Music Pleasure. And I second that emotion. We've grown with you from the time you were a wee one and your family as well. Um, and it's so interesting because you bring so much heart. I heard someone describe an actor as an emotional acrobat. I put you in that category when it comes to your work. And I love it when you play a badass. I really do. Love it when you play a badass. But I'm curious about what you learned about the humanity of an arsonist.
Mm, mm. There was so much that I learned about the inner thoughts of an arsonist and this need to feel powerful, and this need to use something that arguably is one of the most powerful forces we have in nature, fire, and weaponize that and try to dominate that and try to use it to dominate other people and I was really, really surprised, like, listening to the podcast Firebug, which is about John Orr, which this was loosely inspired by. The story was, and to learn that sometimes arsonists get like, a real sexual arousal in their connection with fire. I mean, it's really, really, really fascinating what happens in the brain with folks, um, and what I think the job of an artist is we just are supposed to hold a mirror up. And it's not even about us judging, it's about us reflecting it back for everyone else to walk away with their own opinions about it. But yeah, it's interesting when you think about sociopaths or arsonists or like there's a lot of things that are there's common patterns of something happened in their childhood. There's something that broke them, some sort of trauma, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes. And then what that leads to, that sense of powerlessness, and then how they have to feel like they are able to dominate over others. Yeah. Um, very, very, very fascinating and sad.
It was a real, it was a ride. It was a total ride. I thank you so much for your performance. And as always, it's great to see you.
Thank you so much for the love. I really, really don't take it lightly.
Hi, Jurnee, Jill Monroe, KBLA, Talk 1580. So we talked a little bit about how Michelle is her own interesting persona as she's stepping into this world and examining all of these people in it with all of their interactions. What is her mindset and first impression when she meets Dave, and how does that change throughout the series, sort of comparing it with, I feel as though there's a little bit of her inner turmoil that comes out in her assessment and work. So,
Yes, absolutely. The way I approach their first interaction, for one, she's read all his files. She knows more about him than she's going to let on because she doesn't want to disarm him. I mean, she doesn't want to intimidate him. She knows he don't want her there. And she don't want to be there. Okay. Like, she's been demoted because of her situation with Burke and him, almost trying to get revenge for her breaking up with him. Um, and so she kind of looks at this place, she takes it on as a challenge, as all right, you know, underestimate me, watch me. I'm a catch him, right? But I think her approach with Dave, or my approach when doing that scene, was teach me. Professor, you're the expert. Your reputation is, all around. It's look at these awards. Let's, feed into his ego. I think she's, again, worked in a male dominated field. She understands that her presence can sometimes be intimidating, and with someone like him, she needs him, frankly. So yeah, the approach was very much so, let me humble myself. I don't know anything about what you know, so I want to learn from you, Mr. Professor. Let's go and teach me what you know in the field, right? Like feed into that male ego in a way. And then it quickly is like, look, motherfucker, like we ain't gonna, I outrank you. We not gonna do this, Like she couldn't really make it last too long because the real Michelle came out. But what I loved with Michelle is she has a mask that she's capable of putting up. And when does she decide to wear that mask? And, when does she not? You know,
thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hi, Jurnee. My name is Stacey Vaughn. I've had the pleasure of speaking with you a couple of times. Michelle in this, it's so interesting because the situation you were talking about, where she kind of, puts it on the table, but in a kind of, a more subtle way, versus there's a scene early in the first episode where she gets into her car and the seatbelt is cut. And she's just like, oh, I hate seatbelts. And so she's kind of maneuvered this thing to kind of get around it. It says so much about her as a character, kind of always being in survival mode. Even when it's something that, is supposed to be for her safety, she's like, nah, I know better. Tell me, what is it about Michelle that connects you to her? I know there's a lot of stuff that's on the page and already written, but was there anything that you put into her that you're like, this is going to help me really get involved?
Yeah, a number of things. I do agree that she's in survival mode, and I do agree that yes, the seat belt is very symbolic for a number of things. It's a way, to show that she tends to want to go around the system and buck the system, and will find a way to make the system think that she's following protocol, but she's not. She's still doing it on her terms. I really studied a lot of attachment theory with Michelle. Um, yeah, because the way she attaches and detaches from folks, the way she doesn't allow folks to really become close to her unless they're not a threat, like her niece. Um, she has major trust issues, obviously, because of the traumatic betrayal she experienced with her mother. And so that has made her what experts refer to as an avoidant, super ambitious, super dedicated, workaholic, finds identity in what she produces in life. But intimacy and having to trust folks. That's the thing that scares her the most, letting someone in. The second Burke says, I left my wife, she's like, I'm good. We're done. That was too close, because him being married checked off the boxes for her. Unfortunately, she could experience um and she could experience intimacy, but it wasn't a threat because it couldn't really be more than just that. It could be on her terms. He wasn't coming home with her. They weren't talking about building a life together. It's like, and those are the patterns of someone who has an avoidant attachment style, and they attract people who are anxious oftentimes, and Stephen is that. Even though he has more power in their work, she has more power in their relationship. And he becomes very anxious and very like, well, okay, I'll go back to her. I'll fix it. I don't want to I don't want to make you angry, type of vibe, right? So yeah, I even spoke to a therapist about like attachment theory and trying to understand her more. Because I'm not that way, I'm I'm a people person. I come from a big family. I'm a probably, I'd say I'm an extroverted introvert, because I like people around, but I like kind of being in my corner, but like hearing my family in the kitchen, Um, so I would say that was one of the many things that I really tried to inspect with her.
I think you did a beautiful job. Thank you so much for taking time with me today.
Hey, Jurnee, Nick Hamilton, Nightcast Media. First of all, thank you for doing this. And I want to ask you, just what are a couple misunderstandings of Michelle, and also how important is it to showcase Michelle's mental, as far as when we talk about mental health, and all from the trauma that she had to unfortunately experience?
I love talking about that because honestly, I'm not interested in perpetuating the stereotype that as a Black woman we are always going to be strong. I mean, I'm really not, because I think that does us a disservice, right? Um, to our community in general, right? Like, we are not always strong. We are vulnerable. We're afraid. We have panic attacks. We screw up. We are flawed, and that is one of the things I so loved about playing Michelle, was really leaning into her flaws and the morally ambiguous choices she makes sometimes, right? Um, and that struggle where there's the expectation to be a certain way and to take on that a bit of a masculine energy, right? But inside she's still that little girl trapped in a closet, that in a house that's burning down, right? And um so yeah, I just loved playing with that energy of her struggle. Um, I think representation matters, and I think if look, I love playing, moments where she kicking butt and like the rest of them. Those are fun. But I think it's also important to show her mental health issues. Um, we sometimes we don't, as a society, we don't normalize those things enough. And so when we all struggle with moments of anxiety or depression or sadness, and you feel like, I don't know how to take the next step, right? Like, I think as artists, it's our job to just show the truth that, folks, you're not alone. You know, you're not alone in that.
You truly brought some authenticity to the character, especially like you said about mental health and just the different layers that you were also able to showcase. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much for that observation. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hi, Nigeria Chambers from Big Go Belt Media. Jurnee, thank you for your time today. I want to talk about something you have talked about recently in a few other interviews, and it is about the physical transformation. As we see, gaining and bulking up about 15 pounds of muscle, which is completely impressive. But what I want to ask, what I don't think you cover, is not only talking about the preparation behind the physical transformation, but the emotional transformation along with that as well too. I'm wondering if you could talk about you as an actor, stepping into the character. When did it all align? When did the physicality, the physical preparation, the mental preparation, when did it all just start to fully make sense for you in terms of the transformation?
Great question. I think, part of my process when I'm stepping into a character is research, just like research and pull from every clue that the script gives you and fill in it all, fill in the blanks. Um, and so the physical transformation was a huge part because, again, her being an avoidant, you got to have some sort of outlet, right? So when the outlet, the energy can't be channeled through your work, and it can't be channeled through Burke, it's channeled through her running and her escaping, and she's running from stuff, and she's pouring the frustrations and the pain and the anger and the rage into her workouts. And I researched like the Marine training. Man, that is no joke. Okay. Um, the workouts that they do are incredibly intense, and having to train under different elements, having to train under crazy heat, right? Carrying 50 pounds on your back and crawling through the desert. I mean, and so you know, I think all of that just into me of like, there's just a muscular presence that she needs to have. And it doesn't need to be overt. It doesn't need to be so obvious, but I need to feel it and I need to know that it exists. Because Jurnee, I think prior to this, I was like 120 pounds, right? Like, and then Michelle's sitting at 140. And so it's just a different presence. It makes me walk different. It makes me carry myself different. It makes me sit different. Um, yeah, of like knowing, all right, she's been trained. There's certain battles. So I trained with my trainer. We did a lot of boxing. We did a lot of like, all right, she can fight. So, what does that feel like? Um, and physicality for me is a huge part of building a character. Um, you know, your gait, the all that stuff. I don't want people to see it when they're watching it, because then I think it's too obvious. But it is very intentional for me.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Chris again here, Jurnee. If you could describe Smoke in 3 words, what would they be and why?
Oh, 3 words. Combustible. um, unexpected, and joyride. Is that
Well said.
does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Jurnee. So my second question is kind of connected to my first one where I talked about Michelle's penchant for observing people or men, particularly from a distance, but then also getting super close to them. And that's interesting to me because she has avoidant personality disorder in a way, like for someone who's so quick to escape and run, she doesn't have a problem getting super physically close to people. And I think that's an interesting contradiction in her character and her persona. And I wanted to ask you, because as we were talking, it made me think, I wonder if this is connected to her mother, because the similarities that she has with Freddie and with what am I forgetting? Is it Gunderson? Is that all 3 of them got mommy issues. And she only realizes this when she's, again, observing them, when she's taking the time to watch what these men are saying and what they're not saying. And I wanted to know if the reason she's able to connect to men so easily is because she finds it harder to connect to women. right? And I wanted to ask you about that because I thought I was just like, huh, I wonder if she got like, like that's why there's so few women in her life.
Well, she connects to people on her terms. So men or women, it's okay. It's still on her terms. So she connects with her niece and she connects with her sister-in-law. I think those are probably the only two women in her life that she has allowed close enough to come in, right? But it's still on her terms. And I think with men, especially the men in her life, they're still not coming home with her, you know. They're still not waking up next to her in bed. When she was with Steven, that was at a hotel. He shows up to her house and that's like jolting to her. If she doesn't invite him in, she tells him to go home, right? He shows up at her stoop. And so again, yes, absolutely it's connected to her mother. Absolutely. Which in studying attachment theory, oftentimes, your primary attachment figure is your mother or father, right? And when that is splintered, it makes the attachment patterns in your adulthood with relationships oftentimes be a certain way. Like, as I was saying, like some people become anxious and they need to cling on, and then other people become very distant and detached when things become too close. So Michelle's of the latter. But yeah, even with the men in her life, it's on her terms and the way she attaches.
Yeah, she's like the seatbelt. She's the seatbelt that got cut, right? She doesn't make any connections, so she cuts them before it can even form. And also, I noticed we didn't get to see her house again after the first episode. We never really get to see the interior of her house except for when she's really destroying it. We don't get to see the complete.
There's a few moments sprinkled in, but yes, you don't see it completed. There's a few moments of like me with my niece or when I'm investigating Dave, but you're right. Look, she's in a pattern of creation and destruction. And so you don't see her house completed because she's in that pattern of constantly destroying things in order to rebuild them.
She's an enigma, but thank you so much for I think crafting such a complex and complicated character. I love seeing Black women playing complicated characters like that because like being messy can be fun. To an extent, not like her, but thank you.
Everyone's messy to a certain degree. Some people more messy than others, and Michelle's definitely, she on this side of the spectrum of messiness, but I really appreciate your observations about it though. That means a lot.
Thank you.
Hey, Jurnee, it's Karan again. My niece's name is Jurnee, by the way. I want to know what Jurnee's favorite part of Michelle is.
Jurnee's favorite part of Michelle, to play or just
What do you like about her? What do you respect about her? How do you hold her in high regard?
I think she's very intelligent. I think she's the smartest person in the room, or at least she thinks she does. But I think she's very prepared, very thorough, well read. She's not stepping into a situation without having researched everything. I mean, and that's a characteristic I really respect because it's what I aspire to do. If I take on a character, I want to know everything about this character, even before I have the first meeting with the storyteller, because I want to come so prepared. And yes, if we collaborate and there's new ideas that come or new things that the storyteller tells me about the person, then that's one thing. But I want to come prepared. And so, yeah, I love how prepared she attempts to be. But I also love her messiness. I love how while she can be prepared, she can make really uh interesting choices, yeah. I loved playing with those gray areas.
I keep hearing Prince, Vanity Six rather, in my ear that there was a song he wrote for Vanity Six called Pretty Mess. Um, different context, but great song. But thank you so much again. This was brilliant. I really love the way um, you carried out her intellect when it comes to knowing when to be quiet and observe and knowing when to push. I really enjoyed your performance.
Oh, that means so much. Really. Thank y'all. Y'all are just so loving. I really, really appreciate the love.
Hi, Journey. Jill Monroe again. You talked a little bit about your research into arsonists and what makes them tick, and so to speak. How do you think Michelle's relationship to fire is? Because we see different moments of its impact, but what do you think her thought process is on her relationship with fire?
So when I first met with Dennis, we talked about that, the fire being a metaphor for this force in her life that she's drawn to. It's part of that creation destruction pattern where he said to me, he said, Journey, we all say we want to be happy, and yet sometimes we are often drawn to the very things that will destroy us. And that is Michelle in a sentence, you know, um, where it's like, all right, whether it's a toxic relationship or her inability to overcome her childhood trauma or her need to be a workaholic and prove herself, in the workplace, she's in these toxic patterns and drawn to the things that keep her not feeling safe, that keep her not feeling happy, that keep her away from being actually the best version of herself. And I think that's a universal thing we can all relate to. While the details might be different in our life, we all either have currently or in the past or will in the future struggle with being enticed by those elements that are destructive, and that fight against us achieving the best and becoming the best version of ourselves.
Amazing. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, Journey. It's Stacey Yvonne again. I wanted to ask about the tattoo that Michelle has. It's really this kind of imposing, very eagle kind of thing. And I wanted to know specifically, did you have to kind of have that on during the entire shoot? Was it something that was applied daily? And then if you did have it kind of out in your daily life, were there times that you snuck glimpses? You're like, who am I?
Yeah. We did put it on daily. And I was really, I worked with our amazing makeup artist, Rita, to design it. And there were some elements that we added. Like, I really wanted there to be some reference to her destroying her old self. And so we came up with this idea of adding no mercy, which you think is a reference to the military,
Right.
because it obviously is a tattoo she got, you know, um, because of being a Marine. But no mercy is actually in reference to her former self, because her name actually is not Michelle, it's Mercy.
That's right. I love that. It's so, again, completely layered and just wonderfully performed. Thank you.
Hi, Journey. Nick Hamilton again. With Michelle going through so many different ebbs and flows throughout the series, was there one thing that you felt like you wanted her to tackle that she didn't get a chance to
In this season, you're
in this
saying?
season?
Oh yeah. I mean, um, it's interesting when you're making episodic stories. On one hand, you get the benefit of more real estate than a film, so more runway to explore. And then when you start going down the path, you're like, but wait, we got to do this, and then we got to do this. And so if you notice, the mother's not in this season. You know, she's very much so, her presence is, but she's not. Um, and so that was very intentional on Dennis's part. Um, if we were to get a season 2, very much so have to explore that.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I think that would be answer so many other questions that we necessarily didn't get direct answers to, but it would have filled in maybe some blanks, so to speak. So hopefully you guys do get a season 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Nigeria Chambers again. I'm curious if there's aspects of Michelle from in any of your previous roles, such as like Lovecraft Country or Underground, or did this character completely push you out of your normal territory into like a whole new creative space?
That's a great question. I don't know that I would intentionally ever pull from other souls to give life to another soul. But I absolutely believe along your path of art, right? Like every character changes your instrument, and every character forces you to grow and forces, well, hopefully the goal is that they force you to evolve in some way. And so, yes, on one hand, I absolutely think she's an extension of every character I've played because it's me, right? You know, and my instrument has evolved by playing all of these different characters. And the goal is by the end that I've created some museum of art, right? Where I can look back and go, okay, yeah, like that was a very versatile career you had, and a lot of different colors you were able to play with. But when I'm stepping into the playground and creating a character, I'm really not thinking about the past characters at all. I'm really only focused on her. And so, yes, she absolutely pushed me and made me step outside of my comfort zone and have to access parts of myself that felt dormant in ways. You know, also made me access certain things in my childhood. You know, I had a very beautiful, close, magnetic, and still do, obviously, with my mother. Very incredible relationship with my mom. My mom's a queen, you know, and if any of you ever get to meet her in 2 minutes, you will see, like, oh, yeah, Janet is a phenomenal woman. But my dad's relationship was estranged from the time I was 12 until I was like 26. And so that's interestingly a very similar timeline with Michelle. And there is something that happens to you, if any of us have experienced that, when there's the absence of one of your primary attachment figures. And so it did force me to reconcile that. And while, look, my dad, you know, is no longer with us, and I was able to heal that relationship prior to that, to him passing. And it's very different than Michelle. It's not like some big childhood trauma or anything, but still a strained relationship is a strained relationship. And so it definitely did force me to kind of unearth a little bit of that and confront that and confront how it informs your intimate relationships, how it informs your attachment patterns. Um, so yeah, she definitely pushed me to the edge of my comfort zone and beyond. Like homegirl was like, "You not staying in your comfort zone in order to bring me to life." Like we're pushing you. So yeah, definitely.
So much of this conversation today felt as if this role was very therapeutic for you personally. And I think us as the viewers, I think we feel that as well too.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you know, the goal is that art can be healing for me and for the folks experiencing it in some way. And that doesn't mean I'm solving anyone's problems, but just posing questions and stimulating things and impacting you enough to make you feel something. So I thank you. I thank you for that. And yes, I do find that I am drawn to certain characters that force me to exercise stuff within myself.
We thank you as well.
Thank you. Gil, you're on mute. I see you talking.
I was saying we double that what Nigel said. We thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for just a live. I mean, it's your growing library of work that is thought-provoking, that's entertaining, and that is creating an amazing legacy for yourself. So thank you for, again, hitting the ball out the park. On
Oh, I
behalf,
thank you so much, Gil. Thank
absolutely, absolutely. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film and TV critics, thank you for watching this edition of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.